Welcome to another edition of To My Way of Thinking. We talk with some of the tree shakers, policymakers, and those persons who are making contributions to our city, state, and our nation. Today, we're talking with Wayne Clark. He is one of several candidates for the position of sheriff of Duval County, one of the largest counties, of course, in the nation, with a vast reach. The sheriff of this county has a vast reach. He has although we're a consolidated city, or county as you want to have it, he does have to lend his support and sometimes manpower to the Beaches community, which has their own sheriff and mayor and city council, and the Baldwin area, which has the same. Jacksonville acts as the city commission for all of that. And of course, as with all counties, everybody looks to the sheriff to get the final job done and put them in the big jail that we have downtown. Thanks for joining us, Wayne.
Thank you for having me on, Fred.
All right. Glad you were able to make it. You've got, we're going to dive right on into it here. What is the state of law enforcement in Duval County?
Duval County, at the current state of law enforcement, there appears to be a vacuum of leadership. I think that is one of the major issues currently in the sheriff's office. You know, the sheriff's office every 2 years do a community survey for the citizens to talk about what do they think about the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office still enjoys overwhelming approval of the people, with some exceptions. A couple of those exceptions is that the officers sometimes appear to be overly aggressive or arrogant when they're dealing with the public. This is coming from the 2020 citizen survey. And then the thing that I see as I go about watching what's going on is we have an absentee sheriff, that when we have tragedy in our community, we don't hear from the sheriff. You know, so I think that there's a lack of leadership coming from the top, and accountability is where that starts. And so we need a sheriff that's willing to be a leader and not afraid to go out into every community of Jacksonville, regardless of the community, in times of crisis and in times of good, to build that goodwill. So we have some work to do as a sheriff's office here in Jacksonville. As far as recruiting additional officers to look more like the community. We have some work to do in the sheriff's office as far as training our officers in the area of mental health, de-escalation techniques. We have some work to do in our sheriff's office as related to how do we go back to community policing and how do we positively engage those communities that are crying out for our help.
Now, you used the term that he's an absentee sheriff, and also, you indicated from your standpoint that, at least from the community survey, not necessarily from your standpoint, that many citizens have felt a bit of arrogance among officers, I guess, on the beat or when they have to encounter them for different issues. Why? What's behind that? You've been a sworn officer for quite some time. What's behind any claims of arrogance of police officers?
So that goes back to training and accountability. It's like, almost like having children. If you let them get away with a small thing, they get away with more things. And so we need to make sure that we tell our officers what we expect of them and we hold them strictly accountable. And, if I hear a citizen say that Officer Clark was a bit arrogant, okay, that's one complaint. But when you have officers that have multiple complaints of being rude, that's called a clue. And when you look at the survey that was done, when you look at the numbers was up in the high 70s, I believe, almost 80% said that. We got to look at that there may be some truth to what people are saying. And so how do we train that out of officers? Because one of the things that we need to do, we need to find a way for officers to understand that people want us to be that officer friendly when they approach us. They want us to treat them with dignity and respect. And, because we tell people, if you need us, come to us. But when we come to you, and if they get that negative in kind, we need to move away from that through training.
Now we've got stop stations in shopping centers, on front side of shopping centers all across the county, where people can go in and take care of minor issues, that sort of thing. And I think the thinking would be that would be sort of a forerunner for a bit of community policing. But again, I have not necessarily seen that be the case anymore. I don't even see I guess we've gotten rid of the horses, because I don't even see the horses around downtown like we saw at one time before. But to do community policing, we're talking about an increase in the budget and also an increase in manpower, which, the law enforcement gets the biggest share, one of the biggest shares of the city's budget every year. Is it going to cost us more money to get back into community policing, as you say?
No, Fred, it won't cost us any more money. So a couple of things, let me answer. The Sheriff's Office also commissioned a study by the International Association of Chiefs of Police looking at their geography and their personnel. This is about 3 years ago. And when you were talking about the horses, they recommended that the sheriff bring the horse unit back because it is a good community relations piece in the community, and that the sheriff fund it fully. Now, the sheriff has brought back the mounted unit because while there are some policing functions they can do for us, it is a huge community engagement piece that we can use because people love horses. Now, when you talk about community policing, we can't just say that we're about community policing. We got to be about community policing, and community policing doesn't really cost us anymore. So let me just look at the issue of the stop stations that we had in shopping centers when Sheriff Glover came along. We're talking about 25 years ago. And that was the nice concept. We had a lot of business people that stepped up, offered space for us to put stop stations in shopping centers and certain other business centers as a way for officers to stop by and write their reports. But technology has changed. Now officers write their reports in their cars on their computers. They don't have to get out and go physically write a report. The Sheriff Glover, when he was sheriff, he wanted to move officers out of the police station, out into the community in substations in the 6 zones. We had no money to build physical buildings, so he took the space of shopping centers. Every substation we have now is in a shopping center, with the exception of Edward Waters University. Now, Edward Waters University, when Dr. Claudette Williams was the president, she and I collaborated, and we were able to raise the initial $500,000 to build that standalone full-service police substation on the HBCU campus. When I worked to have that built by the Haskell Company, we collaborated with them on the engineering and design. The goal was to put standalone police substations in all 6 zones. When we look at fire departments, they don't have fire stations in shopping centers. They have fire stations in neighborhoods. What we need to do is look at moving those substations out of shopping centers, putting them in some of these neighborhoods that need some additional help, kind of like if you build it, they will come, to support that neighborhood and to be able to engage that neighborhood more positively. Community policing doesn't cost anything because when I was at the sheriff's office, I instituted a program that's called Park and Walk. Just by me making the command so and holding my supervisors accountable for the officers do it, I require those officers to park their cars for 2 hours of the day and get out and go inside and talk to people in stores, see someone in a park, see someone watering their yard, give them your business card and introduce yourself to that person so that we can build those relationships of trust. Community policing doesn't cost money. It just takes leadership to say that we're going to do it because, officers, rather than them sitting somewhere under a tree talking to one another, I need you to get out. Rather than sitting on that tree in the shade, get out and go inside and go in the air conditioning of a business, talk to that business owner, get to know that business owner, take your break on the inside. You get a break, I get a favor that you start to build trust in the community. So community policing doesn't cost any money. It's a policy decision, and it's a philosophy that we need to push into every officer.
Now, it sounds a bit like you're on the crime prevention side, but there's a process here. There's a thought process of what police officers do. Now, my feeling is that police officers don't necessarily prevent crime. They have 2 main jobs, and that is to investigate and arrest. Are you talking about more than that for the police officer?
While we do have to investigate and we do have to arrest, again, I'm going to go back to my own experience. In 2007, I was put in charge of an operation called Operation Safe Streets. We were the murder capital of Florida. And the sheriff at the time, Sheriff Rutherford, allowed me to be in charge of all the resources of the sheriff's office to go out and to proactively prevent crime. We were able to reduce murders and violent crime to a 25-year low from 2007 to 2010 because we were proactive to go out on the prevent rather than to let it happen and try to solve it. What we need at the sheriff's office to be more proactive in our approach rather than reactive. You say, well, what did you do to be more proactive? For one, we use data to tell us where we needed to deploy our limited resources, what time we need to deploy our resources, and what numbers we need to deploy them to prevent things from happening. Bad guys don't want to get caught. And sometimes it is this displacing crime, because if I come to your corner, Fred, where you were selling stuff and the corner is hard, you can't sell, you got to go someplace else. But you can't pick any corner because other corners belong to other people. So maybe you'll go someplace else. Another program that we did is we use what we call high visibility patrols. When we talk about preventing crime and how do we calm the fear of crime, because statistically, I can tell you, Fred, that crime is down in your neighborhood. But if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter, because I got to fight your perception of crime. So I copied a program from Washington, D.C. when Chief Ramsey was there. He got that program from Israel. It's called High Visibility Patrols. So we know the neighborhoods that crime happens, the time they happen. When we had the officers patrol with what we call cruiser lights. That's the one red and the one blue light on their light bar. How do we make the invisible visible? Because when we see the police, and we're good people, we feel safe. When bad people see the police, they go someplace else. I had a story. We were at Edward Waters College at the Shell Suite Center out, and this is like 2009. We were talking about how we were reducing crime, and this lady told the sheriff she don't care anything about those numbers. I don't feel safe because I don't see the police. Well, that's what caused me to institute high visibility patrols. About a year later, she saw the sheriff. She came up, she hugged the sheriff and said, "Sheriff, I don't know what you did, but I see the officers everywhere. Now I feel safe. I'm able to come out into my neighborhood. I'm able to sit on my porch." When we look at these racing up and down the highways now, people race because they don't see the police. If you see the police, you're not apt to race. Will we stop everything? No, but I think we can make a dent.
What is the difference?
High visibility patrols.
High visibility patrols.
Yes.
What are the differences in law enforcement between the beaches versus Arlington versus Mandarin versus the East Side?
So I've gone down to the beaches and talked to their chiefs of police. I've talked to their mayors. I've gone down to spend time to find out what is it that they do differently in the beaches than what we do in Duval County. I've also gone to St. Johns County to see what they do differently. I've talked to some of the other sheriffs around. The beaches are their own autonomous cities, and they just have a whole different culture out there at the beach. To be very candid, one of the chiefs at the beach told me that they rather do it themselves than to get JSO involved, simply because their officers are more, let me see the word he used, they're more inclined to work with their people and be understanding than some of the JSO officers who come there with an arrogant or attitude. And I don't want to tell you what chief told me that, because I've talked to all three of them down there. So the beaches are they're a very tight knit community. They're a very vocal community. They've always been a little bit different from the metropolitan part of Jacksonville. But when we look at the other areas of town, one of the things that I think that is a driver of some of the crime is the lack of economic opportunity in some of those neighborhoods. Because I think an economic opportunity for all is a good strategy to reduce crime. Because, I grew up, Fred, on the east side of Jacksonville. Growing up, I knew all the people who sold dope, who sold numbers, who sold illegal liquor on Sunday. Everybody had their hustle on. But we look now, it's hard out there hustling in the street. I think that most people would rather earn an honest living than a hustle living, because when you're hustling, you're worried about the police officer arresting you on one side, you're worried about the jack man on the other side, and you're worried about getting killed. So, it's a lot of pressure. So I think the city need to focus on building infrastructure in some of those areas like Arlington, northwest side of Jacksonville, downtown Jacksonville, east side of Jacksonville, infrastructure in the sense that it'll attract some of those major businesses to come into those neighborhoods with the concept, if you build it, they will come, and like a high tide rising, coming in, raising all boats in the harbor.
Now, the current sheriff has been able to get reelected despite some of the issues that you cited with that. And it doesn't appear to have caused that much concern among the voting public. Would it be good on your end to take some of the things that he's done, or do you see that there were other forces at play that allowed him to get reelected and carry on pretty much the conservative method of policing that many people have grown accustomed to?
So when we look at his first election, he almost lost to Ken Jefferson. It was not that landslide of a victory. And we look at his second election, he ran against an opponent who was a very weak opponent, and that opponent got 45% of the vote. So it's not like he's been winning by a huge landslide. There are some things that the sheriff has done that I think that we could keep as a program. But when you look at the difficulty, he has put roadblocks up as far as promptly releasing video of incidents that happen involving the officers. We say that we want transparency. We want the video cameras to be able to show transparency, but reluctance in doing that. You look at his reluctance to work with the citizens to give us the adult civil citation program. The jail is overcrowded. They're talking about building a bigger jail. We don't need a bigger jail. We just need not to put people in jail that don't need to go to jail. We have to look at things a little differently. And we have so many misdemeanor arrests that we put in jail, clogging up the system. The state attorney is not going to prosecute. They're going to get a slap on the wrist. We can take an alternative view, give an adult civil citation. We don't scar that person with an arrest. We get the same result, and the jail population go down. We look at the co-responder program when dealing with our mental ill people in town. Most of our homeless and mental illness people are the veterans that we have around town. The jail can't be the de facto mental health hospital. The co-responder program is a program where Pinellas County here in Duval in Florida has the model for the state, where we put a social worker and a specially trained officer together. So when we get a mental health call, we wait, because we should keep our time. We have time and keep our distance. Allow that person to come with the co-responder who have other tools in their box to triage this person and send them to a mental facility versus bringing them to the jail. So we got to work smarter and not harder, and look at things differently, because times has changed. There seem to be so many people now with mental issues than when I first came on, because of either PTSD, be the trauma they're seeing in their neighborhoods, PTSD coming from the military. They got people who've been chemically mental illness induced because they've gotten hold of some bad drugs. So just looking at things differently now is what we need from the sheriff, and let's work with the whole community to find alternatives than what we've been doing.
Well, along those lines, the word de-escalation comes to mind. There was a young man who was shot, I understand, some 13 times by officers over on the west side of Jacksonville, off of near San Juan and Cassett Avenue. It was a simple traffic stop, but someone saw that he had a gun, even though he wasn't necessarily pointing it at the officers. It looks like he was pointing it at himself, and pretty much it was deemed a suicide. But even then, the young man appeared to be in distress from the video that we finally saw several weeks, maybe a month or so after the incident, but he was shot 13 times. Does the word de-escalation, as far as you understand, I know you hate to second guess other officers, but does the word de-escalation, have you found that to be a major issue in training for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
So I don't know the current state of training in the Sheriff's Office as far as de-escalation training. A little quick sidebar story. as I go about, a lot of people ask me about current policies in the sheriff's office. So I've been gone for 12 years. So I wanted to enroll myself in the Citizens Academy to bring myself up to speed as to what they're teaching as their current techniques. Of course, the sheriff's office wouldn't let me go to the Citizens Academy, although I'm a citizen now because I'm not sheriff. So I don't know, and I don't know why they wouldn't let me go. But when de-escalation is a real big issue now, we teach our officers how to engage, but we don't teach them how to disengage. But we need to, because a lot of times when we see the temperature is rising before the pot boil over, let's walk away. You don't have to stand there and wait till the pot overboil and then we overreact and do things. When Sheriff McMillan came in, he really tried to change the culture of the agency, and he coined this phrase, "Don't be upset when someone steps on Superman's cape." Police being Superman, because back then we were arresting a lot of people for frivolous charges because the police had the power to do that. So we need to, in times when it allows, give people time and space to come out of their crisis situation. Now, with the situation involving the young man over there you talked about, I have not seen that video. That's very tragic. My heart goes out to the family. At the end of the night, everybody want to go home. The officers want to go home. The citizens want to go home. And it's very tragic, but sometimes it's called a sympathetic reflex. When one officer starts shooting, other officers start shooting also. It's one of those phenomenons. It's a human phenomenon. We've got to get over it. We try to train it out of people. I don't know why they shot 13 times. I have not seen the report to see that because I wasn't there, but that's a very tragic situation. Because God forbid, if my whole career, I've never shot anyone, but I hope that I never would have to, because that's traumatic on the person that's doing the shooting as well.
Do you believe that we still have a major gang problem in Duval County? Obviously, there are issues that still happen over in Sherwood on the north side. There are growing violent issues that have been occurring over there in Arlington with different ethnicities popping up and growing there. Do you still think we have a gang problem that has to be dealt with better than it has?
Yes, I think that we do have a gang problem. And Fred, when you look at it, Jacksonville's at 1 million people now. By every measure, we're a big city. And when you become a big city, you get big city issues. And we look at the influx of people from all over the country, all different ethnicities. And yes, we do have some gangs that we need to deal with to be proactive, to make sure that they're not warring with each other. So for the 10, 15 years ago, most of the serious violent gangs in Jacksonville were Black gangs, but we're starting to see some of the Middle Eastern, Russian, Bosnian type gangs coming up with some of their issues with drugs and prostitution. They're big into the human trafficking side of things. We started getting some of the Hispanic or Latino gangs coming in from, the influx of people coming in from the border. So yes, we need to be proactive. About 20 years ago, when McMillan, again, 25 years ago, when McMillan was there, the question was asked, do we have a gang problem in Jacksonville? And they didn't want to admit that we were having a gang problem. That's when crack was coming. We had, the Miami boys and all those guys coming to town. We allowed the situation to get out of hand before we finally realized that, yes, we do have a gang problem. So yes, we do have some issues with gangs, and we need to be proactive to make sure that we identify those persons and we do our due diligence to make sure that we remove them from the arena as quickly as we can to prevent violence in the city.
Yeah, you mentioned a bit ago about the jail and the fact that it's overcrowded. I find that's kind of strange. I haven't heard the word overcrowding the jail in quite some time. Do we need to move the jail? We're about to build across the street from the sheriff's office after the Berkman 2 has been blown up and torn down. The developer is about to build a 41-story spire right next to Berkman, to the original Berkman. We've got the new Navy ship that's going to come in and be docked next to that as a new museum. We've got the fire museum, which has just been rolled down that way to come in. We've got the Museum of Science and History that is going to take up some space also on the riverfront along Bay Street. And of course, down the road there, we have Conland, as I call it, which in addition to having the stadium and the new things that are going to happen around there with Daly's Place, we've torn down we've made a new exit off of the Hart Bridge. We're looking to get a 5-season or so hotel built there along Bay Street, along that property with new docking and boating. But we still got the smell of coffee on the other side, and we got a great eye view of the jail. In fact, the inmates of the jail will have a wonderful view of the riverfront when they're there. Do we need to move the jail? Would you be in favor of moving the jail if that proposal actually came to the floor?
So, it was always questioned when they built the jail, first of all, why did they build the police station close to the river when they first built it? And then they built the jail directly behind it on all that prime real estate. Of course, we didn't have the Jaguars at the time. Sometimes there's not enough vision in the city to see how valuable this river would come at some point in the future. There's been talk about moving the jail for the last 15, 20 years. You look at City Hall is gone, the old courthouse is gone, all those other buildings on the river are gone. The only thing that's left as far as government buildings down there now is the police station and the jail. So, you're talking about building a new jail, you're probably talking about a $250 million commitment. Where we're going to put it, it needs to be somewhat convenient for the courthouse. There are some land probably in the La Villa area, but it needs to, long term, we need to look at a long-term plan to move the police station and the jail off of the riverfront to some other convenient location. But that's going to take a lot of commitment and a lot of money and a lot of time.
Well, I mean, it's not like the funding for it's going to come out of the sheriff's budget. That would be a collaborative thing that the city and everybody would have to be involved in. And I would imagine that if it is agreed to, there'll be some developer ready to jump into that spot right there when it comes up. So it's not like the sheriff's budget. It's just that if the sheriff, if you're not in agreement with moving it, that would be one of the first obstacles that anybody would have, is that the sheriff is not in agreement with moving it. So are you just open to the possibility of moving it? Are you in favor of moving it? So
without some additional study, here's some things that I think that would make me more inclined to say, okay, we can move it. We look at our court system now. If we were to move to an electronic first appearance system where inmates don't have to physically go to the judge's chambers for first hearing, we could put that jail anywhere and we can do it from electronically. Then it's wide open. Somehow we need to look at how our courts operate so that the jail don't have to be in a close proximity to the courthouse. And then it opens up, you can put the jail anywhere. You look at Orange County down in Orlando. Now, their jail is off of John Young Parkway in I-4. Very nice, big, new modern jail. I don't know if you've ever seen it. They moved their jail out of the way, and it's away from their courthouse. And so with the electronics, once you go to jail, you just stand before the camera, you see the judge on a video screen. I don't have to transport you. I save money in transportation. I save money in personnel costs, and you're still already in the jail. So if we were to look at it holistically through the court systems, and their agreements with that, we could literally build a jail anywhere in the city we want to. It still need to be somewhat central so that all the zones can come to a central spot somewhere near downtown, but it don't have to be downtown. And it would be off the river, and that now it can really be an entertainment district for the whole city on that property downtown.
Now, you partially answered this already, but I'm going to ask anyway. What are 3 priorities that your department would be looking to accomplish? At least 3.
So the very first thing that we need to do is work in the communities to build trust, accountability, and accessibility all together. They all go together because, in certain communities in Jacksonville and across the country, there's a lack of trust between the police and those communities, and that's because of a lack of a relationship. And we've got to work to build those bridges back, to build trust, particularly with our younger people and with our people who are in some of the challenging neighborhoods. Because, and with that, it comes accountability, because accountability starts at the top. You know, as a sheriff, I want the people to hold me accountable, but I'm also going to hold the people accountable. If I come and work in your community and we agree to do something, I need you to hold up to your bargain, because I'm going to hold up to my bargain. And accessibility, because we've got to be willing to come out of our offices, to go down, to talk to people, to meet with people, to understand their issues and concerns, because I can't come and tell Fred what's wrong with Fred. I have to talk to Fred. You tell me, and then based on my experience, I can tell you, like a doctor, this is how I can help you solve your situation. But we got to work at that together. The other thing that I think we need to do is we got to have compassion in how we go about doing law enforcement. Things have changed. When 50 years ago, when there was very little crime, we could say we're going to fight all crime and we're going to take care. But now we have to triage crime to figure out which ones that we need to address in the immediacy to take care of those things that are driving our city, i.e. violent crime, and look at alternatives for arrest, because we cannot arrest our way out of this. And we can't throw all the money into doing this, because there are people, when we look at the economy now, there are people struggling. Gas is $4 a gallon. That loaf of bread that costs $3.50, the guy that's making $20,000 a year got to pay $3.50 for it, but the guy making $1 million, it doesn't bother him. You got people making decisions. Do I buy my children clothes, or do I pay my tag on my car? Do I get my driver's license fixed, or do I do this for my kids? So we got to have compassion about how we go about policing, and how do we put serve back in front of protect? How do we become that officer friendly? How do we become part of the community and not an oppressor in the community? And the last thing we need to be is transparent in all of our communications and all of our processes. When we are getting ready to make a major change at the sheriff's office, what's wrong, Fred, with me reaching out to certain people in the community, bring them in a room and say, hey, listen, here's what we're thinking about doing. What do y'all see as the implications of this? It would go out better to say that the sheriff collaborated with the right stakeholders to talk about a policy change. And we looked at all the potential unintended consequences. And this is what we decided as a community as the best way to move forward. It doesn't hurt my pride to work with the citizens to come up with that idea. And people, because they want to have a part of the process, they want to have a voice. And we owe it to them, because the agency is not greater than the community, and no one officer is greater than the agency. We work for the citizens of Jacksonville.
Now, you as sheriff are not going to be the same guy who wore 2 stars and the guy who drove around in the cruiser those years ago. You're going to be a grand administrator of a huge budget, nearly 1,000-person staff. You've got administration over the jail. And of course, as we talked earlier, you've got communications and doors that you have to keep open for the areas around us, the beaches and Baldwin, to lend them that support when they need it. How are you going to make this work in more of an administrative capacity than you were when you had the 2 stars on your shoulder?
So, the biggest thing is you got to get the right people on your team. The sheriff's office, $525 million budget, $500 million budget, almost 4,000 employees, one of the biggest employers in the city. Here, Jacksonville, 860 square miles, 1 million people in Jacksonville. By any measure we talked about, this is a big corporation to run. The key is making sure that you have other smart people in the room around you who don't necessarily think like you, but who think in the best interest of the citizens. So the biggest challenge I see when I first get there is making sure that I have the right commanders in place and the right supervisors in place, and having a program to train and mentor them so that as we change our policies, I'm just not saying that I want to change. We're making sure that that policy is pushed all the way down to the lowest person. One of the best things that I found is this management by walking around. We heard that was a big thing in the 80s and the 90s. But when you say you want to do something in your organization, the best way to find out if it's happening is you go down to the lowest level and you find out for yourself. Just saying it won't make it happen. You have to go make sure that it is happening. So, One of the things that I want to change a little differently than the current sheriff's offices, I'll still have an undersheriff. That'll be the person that's running the police side of the house. But Fred, I want to create a position. I'm going to say this as a title, but we'll figure out what we call it, like a chief of staff, a person that is my alter ego, my conscience, that's going to help me to make sure that I stay focused on all those community things that we promise that we're going to do in the community. A person that is from the community, that's very learned, very educated, no, don't have to be a lawyer, but someone who is not political in the sense. I want somebody somewhat apolitical, because the sheriff must be the sheriff of all the people, not just one side or the other, to make sure that we as a sheriff's office keep our focus on providing service to the community, preventing crime, solving crime, and then also providing that human side that we're supposed to do for the community.
Your website shows you standing there on the banks of the St. John's with 2 stars on your shoulder. What does that designate? And who is Wayne Clark?
So the sheriff has 5 stars. The undersheriff has 4 stars. And then the sheriff's office currently have 5 directors. They have 3 stars. And then it moved down to division chief, which was my rank. And at my time, there were 14 division chiefs. And then 1 star is an assistant chief. So, the sheriff was a 5-star general. I was a 2-star general. So being a division chief, I commanded half the city when I was there, 580 personnel on the west side, northwest side, and north side of Jacksonville. So that's what distinguished me with the 2-star in that deal. So who is Wayne Clark? That's a very good question. So I was born here in Jacksonville. Very early on in my life, I had an issue where I had a degenerative disc in my back when I was about, I guess, 2 or 3 years old. And for a while I couldn't walk. And I got over that issue, went on, lived a typical normal life, high school, played football. And I remember coming on the sheriff's office, and I finally said, you're going to be on the team at the sheriff's office. And that degenerative disc issue in my back x-ray came up, and they told me I couldn't be a police officer. Man, that was a devastating blow because of the pension rule. And here it is, almost 40 years later, I got the waiver, and I've never had any issues with my back because, that was something that was going to stop me from becoming a dream of being a police officer. But I grew up in Jacksonville over on the east side. My mom and my dad, my dad only went to the 6th grade, had to stop. He was from Georgia, 6th grade. He was a big guy, what that meant. Time him to go to work in the fields. My mom, she only went to like the 3rd grade. She had to help out with cleaning houses, back from Georgia. So they both made their way to Jacksonville looking for a better life. And one thing I can say about them, they really instilled in us the need for an education, because they saw education as the big leveler to make sure that we can come up and get out. We grew up in a shotgun house on the east side. And those who don't know what a shotgun house is long straight hall, all rooms on one side or the other. If you shoot a shotgun, it goes all the way through it on the east side. But they really emphasized on us getting our education. So I was able to graduate high school and start at the sheriff's office at 18 years old as a volunteer police officer. My dad worked at the old police headquarters at 711 Liberty Street in the late 60s. And I can remember as a young boy, we used to walk from our house on the east side to take my daddy his lunch. And we would stay there with him. And his job was to gas up the police cars, check their oil, check their tire pressure, wash their cars, and we helped them out. And I remember in 2003, I was promoted by Sheriff Rutherford and put over the narcotics and vice unit. And my office was in that same building that I came to as a little boy. And oftentimes, Fred, I would look out that window and imagine how when I was a little boy down there with my daddy washing those police cars, and look at me now, I'm here in this building and I'm over the whole building. So, I started at 18 years old as a corrections officer, then a police officer, was a sergeant. I was the youngest sergeant on the sheriff's office at the time. In 1990, I was 28 years old. Became a lieutenant in 1997. I was the only African-American lieutenant on the sheriff's office. Joe Henry was the last one before me, and it had been 10 years. And then I made assistant chief in 2000 over in Zone 6, which is the north side. Then I went to Zone 5, which is the northwest side. I was there until 2003 when I went to narcotics. And then in 2005, Sheriff Rutherford promoted me to division chief and put me in over Patrol West, which was Zones 4, 5, and 6. This is where we were able to reduce murders and violent crime and also reduce traffic fatalities during that time to about 33%. So 2010, I left to go to the airport. I was their chief of police for 4 years. Then in 2015, I came over to the school police department. I was there until this past September, retiring as their chief of police. So I'm married to my wife, Carol. We've been married for 38 years a week ago. We have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. I've lived in Duval County all my life, lived in north side of Jacksonville all my life. This is my city, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let anybody take my city. And I see this as me being available as a servant leader to give myself to the service of to the citizens of Jacksonville, to make sure that this time we pick the ball up at the sheriff's office and we take it across the line for a touchdown.
All right. Excellent. Wayne Clark, candidate for sheriff 2023. Trust, accountability, accessibility, compassion, and I've heard you say it a number of times over the last few minutes, transparency. Yes. Wayne, we're going to check back with you the closer we get to that magic day to see how things are going. But I really appreciate your time today. And I wish you well on this journey. You're certainly one of the more qualified candidates we've had for this office. And as you say, you're from Jacksonville. You know it. So
Duval.
Duval, you know it. So again, thank you for your time, Wayne.
Thank you, Fred. I sure appreciate it.
Right. Next up, Fred's Reviews, a look at today's movies. The Devil Below, 2021. It was released on Netflix. It will get to you.
Eric?
I'm looking for directions to Shockham House.
You never heard of them.
What are you expecting to find here?
Even with a great fire, people don't just disappear. Something else happened.
What are you doing here?
We shouldn't be here.
I want them gone.
Why do you need private security for a scientific expedition?
Well, to keep us safe.
Safe from what?
Wait, hold on 1 second. Hearing something down there. What the hell is that? What happened? Turn it up. Listen to this.
What is that?
This doesn't feel right.
I give this 7 of 10 stars. It's a worthy addition to your Fright Night viewing. Led by little-known actress Alicia Sands and better-known Aidan Canto, supported by Will Patton, this tale of a town destroyed by an unknown species that is kept in check until the explorers come to the mountain is not bad for the genre. Spoiler alert, the black guy doesn't die first, and there apparently will be a sequel. The Devil Below, 2021 on Netflix. It will get to you. And that's going to do it for this edition of To My Way of Thinking. See you again next time.